Okay. So here we have chapter 6. I'm using the electronic version right now, and I'm just going to scroll down, and note that, our editors mentioned that reading rhetorically is attending carefully and intentionally as we read through a text, right? So it's not just flying through it, checking it off a list. We have a lot of readings as college students. Reading rhetorically means really putting more kind of time and effort into your reading so that you don't have to later go back and reread everything to make sure that you picked up on the ideas. It means being open-minded to that text, right? So a lot of us, before we start a text, may go, well, this topic doesn't interest me, or there's nothing else I can learn about this topic, or whatever the case may be. We all have our preconceived notions going into a reading, but we need to kind of shut that voice in our head down so that when we're reading, we really are trying to take in the information and not being narrowly focused or closed-minded about it. Okay, I did put a note here. The below list, because we're talking about, some of the things we need to pay attention to before we read and as we read. But I put that the below list is really crucial when we're thinking really specifically about academic reading, but also writing, right? So we need to pay attention to these things as we read through those assignments that we have. But we also want to consider some of it as we develop our own writing. We need to think about audience and purpose and genre and all of that good stuff. So these are really questions we need to think about before we begin any, of our course reading for sure, but all academic reading as well. A lot of times if we're working with course text, so if you're in a biology class and you have a single text, you don't need to ask those questions before every single reading because the text is all written for you as, college students, as the audience. The purpose is to educate and inform. But with our readings, we're pulling from our textbook and different articles, and then we're bringing now some readings in about food and food studies. So they all are going to have some different answers to these important questions. So just think a little bit about this before you begin those readings, okay? So we want to think about the purpose, the audience, of course. The genre is important, right? Because we need to identify, is this author working to make an argument, or is it, some sort of report, depending on the kind of class? Is it a book review or review of some sort? The medium becomes really important now because we have texts that are not strictly written. We're dealing with a lot of texts that are interspersed with visual, visual displays, whether it's pictures or links to videos that we should go watch. Some of the things we're looking at are all, just visual medium or visual rhetoric. So we'll play around with some of this as we move through this semester with all of our different readings. Okay, and of course the context. What do you know about the larger context? What do you know about the topic? So we're reading something very narrowly focused on, such and such topic, but what do we know about the larger conversation? And what is your own stance, right? We need to kind of recognize who we are as readers and what we're thinking as readers, because that can definitely shift our focus and understanding. And this week, when you go to do some of your readings, this is something that will be addressed again, right? We need to kind of understand what our own biases are when it comes to looking at different sources of information, so we can determine what misinformation is and how to identify that versus factual information. We have confirmation bias, affirmation bias. You'll read about that in this week, right? So right now we're just kind of talking about our previous readings, and then next week I'll have a video about what we read specifically this week. Okay, so there are some, bits about how to become a more active and engaged reader, and these are all important, right? I think they're all things that we need to kind of put some attention and time into, but I really wanted to focus on annotating as you read, and this is an example. I'm making some notes, I'm doing some highlighting. This is the electronic version, but if I, if I showed you my print copy of the text, you'd see I have notes on the margins and things, and that's just so that information doesn't pass me by and I know I am actively engaging in what I'm reading. There is a difference between fast and slow reading, and we have some things we can do to kind of get into the slow reading perspective or standpoint, which means we're, again, putting a little bit more time and effort into it. We're not trying to rush through everything. So, think about, can you perform the text? Is it something that will make a difference to you as a reader and an audience member? Will it help you understand it if it's performative? Make a mark, annotate, right? find problems, read like a writer. This one is really key when thinking about our class because we want to look at the ways that other people are writing, and then maybe we emulate, right? We kind of copy that format or that approach. But we have to read as though we are the writers ourselves, right? To pick up on some of those different habits or methods when it comes to writing. Elaborate and then memorize key passages. And that doesn't necessarily mean make it word for word, something that you commit to memory. It just means memorize those areas where there is particularly important information, and you can then go back to that place. You know where it is, you have it kind of set in your mind. And sometimes it will be important in not this class, but maybe in other classes that you actually memorize, specific details, right? So I just have a few more comments about this chapter. And one is that when we're talking about reading unfamiliar or difficult texts, this is a lot of us, especially when it comes to college reading. We're learning new things, and we're reading different formats and genres than we may be used to, so it can feel a little difficult at times. Some reading we do in academia is very high-minded, and there's a lot of very fancy language, and that can make it difficult to read. And that's just, it's one of those annoying things about academia, is that a lot of times I as an academic, in a lot of ways was taught, you have to show what you know and show how much you know, and sometimes that's through your use of language. But when it comes to our class and thinking about academic writing at the college level, and not at the graduate or doctoral level, it's just about making sure that you're communicating effectively. And that means using words that you're comfortable with, using phrasing that you're comfortable with. It means not trying to strive for, I need a higher vocabulary, or I need much more complex sentences. That stuff just isn't as important as communicating your ideas as effectively as possible. So don't feel like you have to reach for the vocabulary or reach for the complexity in writing the sentence. Your ideas are complex enough, right? That will show as long as you just write, in a manner and in a way that is comfortable and familiar to you, okay? So I also put, choose a modest amount of material to read, and make sure that you're focusing on the thesis. What is this overall argument or the main idea? And topic sentences. Those give us clues about how the author is developing their argument. Okay. And when I highlight it here, I also had the intention of making sure, and I've said this before, don't try to leave all of your college reading to one afternoon. It will inevitably take you twice as long to read as you think it will, especially if you're putting forth the time and effort to do more of the slow reading and not just rush through everything. Break it apart. If you know that your attention starts to kind of wane, or you start to lose focus after half an hour of reading your history text, make sure you just set a timer and say, at half an hour, even if I feel like I'm really into it, maybe I just need to step back, take a look at, Instagram or something to kind of give your brain a break just for a few minutes, and then come back to your reading a little bit more refreshed. Because once we get into pushing past the time frame that we have to kind of focus, the reading it's not doing anything for us. We're just kind of reading notes on the page without really taking in the information. So know yourself as a reader. Choose a modest amount of reading to do at a time, and that means breaking up your schedule a little bit. Okay, and I put here, there's a note here by our editors to resist highlighting, and I put, there is that note, but know that the act of highlighting can really help us engage. So I think what they're intentionally kind of focusing on is this. Sometimes we think, oh, well, I'm highlighting, I must be understanding this, or I must be taking this information in. And that's not the case. Highlighting is a method that we utilize so that we can then go back when we need to study. If we have an exam, or if we're writing a paper, we can go back and find those main ideas that we thought were important when we were reading initially. Highlighting just to highlight won't do anything, right? And that's why the editors of this chapter in our book in general say, make those notes in the margins. Physically pick up a pen or pencil, write notes, either physically on your book. If you have the print copy, you can type them up here as I've done to show y'all, or just have a notebook, right? Your reading journal can serve some of these purposes, right? If that's the way you choose to utilize it. So this is all about just kind of engaging. Okay, so the rest of the chapter is really important, but I think it's all information that once you've read just really makes a lot of sense about how to read the different genres of text and how we should really put forth our effort when it comes to reading. But I want to take a little break here for a few minutes and talk about the annotation exercise. And that is going to be something that we complete for Choi's article. So this upcoming week we have Choi's article. And instead of completing the annotated bibliography, because of everything that's happened over the past couple of weeks, we're just going to do those annotation exercises so that you know exactly what to do for an annotated bibliography. You're going to do some of the practice. We're just not going to do that formal assignment. Okay, so here it's, you want to, sorry, let me scroll down here. So what we really want to focus on is what's needed for an annotation, right? And so another way to think about it is that an annotation is essentially a summary. You are reading some sort of work and then you're summarizing in your own words, which means that you as a reader have to kind of identify, okay, this is a long chapter or article. How can I boil it down to those main ideas? And thankfully with Choi's work, she breaks it down for us with some of the subtopics. So hint, hint. Pay attention to the way she breaks down her information. So when I talk about summarizing, I essentially, use the metaphor. If you are a big fan of a certain television show and you have a friend who's also a fan and they may have missed the most recent episode and they just kind of ask offhand, hey, what happened on the last episode of fill in the blank, Love and Hip Hop, or any of the HGTV shows, or whatever, shows that people are catching up on or streaming or whatever, you're not going to tell them every single little detail. You're really going to talk about what are those main things that happened. You don't have to mention at minute 4 and 12 seconds, this person walked through such and such door and they wore this exact thing and their makeup looked this way. That's too much detail. If they need that much detail, they should just go watch it themselves, right? A summary is just kind of, or an annotation is just giving those main ideas. And that's what we're going to work to do with Choi's article this week, right? Okay, so an annotation, at least for our class, is going to include 3 parts. First is a citation, and this is what would appear on the works cited page, right? So it's that last name, comma, first name, and the title, and those things we probably have some familiarity with high school writing or previous writing. It's, sometimes called a bibliography, but in this English courses and MLA formatting, we call them works cited pages. So we have the citation, and then we have a brief 200 to 300 word annotation, right, which is about 1 paragraph. And then afterwards, I want another paragraph that's not really full. It's a brief one that's just 2 to 3 sentences about what you learned. So that first paragraph is just summary. It's just the author's ideas. You're not making judgments. You're not anything. It's just what are Choi's ideas. And then that smaller second paragraph is what you then learned or what you thought about, right? You're bringing yourself into that second paragraph. You are not in that first paragraph. You're just reporting those main ideas, okay? I've included information here about how to construct a citation, and this is coming from the Purdue Online Writing Lab website. And we're going to consider that Choi's work is a page on a website because it does come from, let me pull this up, it does come from ideas.ted.com. That's the overall website. This is one of the pages on a website. Okay, so don't let that fool you when it comes to how to identify what information it is to create a citation. Okay, so it has information here, and these are examples of citation. This is one citation. Here is another. Okay, so just look to these as examples. So what you will do is actually include that information in the template. So you have your MLA formatted heading, you will have the citation here, you will then have your summary, and then your second briefer paragraph here, and then you're going to include a word count. Okay, and so what I want is for you to just identify the word count for these 2 paragraphs. And you'll note that I have highlighted these paragraphs, and down at the bottom, Microsoft Word is counting for me. So whatever version of Word you're using to complete this, or if you're using Pages and need to then save as a PDF, it will count your words for you. So I want you to show that you have 200 to 300 words for that annotation assignment. Okay, so this is it for this video. Take a break, come back, look at the instructional video. I'll touch a little bit on this assignment there, but that's mostly just about what we're going to do in a general way for the upcoming week. All right, hang in there and then move on to the next video.